Alright, it is December 1950 turn, communist phase. MDG game is Korean MacArthur's War. Here's the present situation. The UN counterattack is on the brink of clearing the North Koreans completely out of South Korea, current scope of the game. Some considerations here. The game will end if all the units, automatic victory if a player eliminates all opposing units within the current scope. So if the UN succeeds in eliminating all these units, then it's an immediate automatic victory, or what happens is they check the victory point numbers to see who wins. Now what'll happen is Incheon and the port, that's 2 victory points. The North Koreans will drop to 0, and the UN will, since they're at -1 right now, go to +1. So that would be a UN victory if these units all get cleared in the next turn. Now, luckily the North Koreans have 2 tools they can use to prevent that outcome. Number 1, they can try and escalate the game, or do escalation here, or police action, so they could roll 3, 4, 5, or 6, goes to limited war. Now North Korea comes into the scope, and then the automatic victory won't apply because all enemy units would have to be cleared out of this scope too. And no, if they win, then the Chinese will cross the border too, and that'll prevent that occurrence from happening. Now if they don't succeed, this is kind of a rule I forgot, but can be used, is guerrillas. Here they are, guerrillas, and apparently this happened in real life. North Korean units disbanded behind the lines in South Korea, and then later they can be placed anytime after that as guerrilla units, which would then be considered a ZOC. A UN unit could move through it, remove it, or it could be used to block lines of retreat, lose 1 step, etc. But the kicker is the UN player loses 1 victory point for every KPA unit that disbands while in South Korea during 1950. Now, I kind of wish I'd used this earlier, but that's okay. All it takes is for the North Koreans in the movement phase to disband this 1 unit, and then the UN victory points, teetering on the brink here, would go up 1, so then the 2 points would take them to 0, so it would be a total tie at that point, or potentially then forcing the UN player to also attempt to escalate. So the plan is, and the weather currently is snow, there's the effects. So the plan is for the communist player, let's call them now what they are, because the Chinese are probably going to be brought in, is they are going to try to escalate first, but they can cover themselves with the disbanding, forming guerrillas in case that doesn't work. And that's the first thing, escalation phase. So boils down to a simple die roll. 3, 4, 5, or 6. And the communist player succeeds in escalating the war. And the roll is, well, that's it. We're at limited war. I think I'm going to mark that too. Let's see. Oh, they're over here. Don't know what would be the appropriate marker. I guess this. Oh, can't put it on the chart. So it's limited war. And what changes? Well, 4 air power points. That's a lot. And the U.S. can start mobilizing National Guard divisions in the U.S., but now the USSR is mobilized. PLA, again, can continue to mobilize, and the PLA can move into North Korea now. So I'm going to do a quick addition. 1, 2, 3, 4, Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if I read this right, there are 7 victory points in North Korea. And now that it's in the scope, they can use that. So that's 9 they're at now. But they're going to take advantage of that to mobilize some Chinese units and also bring these units across the board. So that's the escalation phase. Coming up here, there is a reinforcement phase. Collects and applies as replacement points and chooses to mobilize Chinese and Soviet units. So the first thing we're going to look at is eliminated North Korean units. And they come back, flip the units who, well, these units were involved in that battle for Seoul. So that's their 2 victory points. But now they're going to spend some victory points to mobilize some Chinese armies, excuse me. So let's take a look at this. Yeah, and we see here there are basically 1 VP will mobilize a whole army, which is 3 units. Yeah, and then I broke them up like this. So 12th, 15th, 20th, 26th, 27th. Oh, here's another 26th and the 88th. So maybe we'll pull them back. 78th. Yeah, that's one of the 4 units. So not quite sure how many to mobilize here, but let's at least mobilize the 26th. And they are placed in China to start, and they can rail in. So 1, 2, this is going to be hard to kind of keep track of. 3, I think I'll record it somewhere else so I make sure I don't double mobilize. So that's 1 victory point. Let's see if there's another one. 20th, 27th, 39th. That's the first set. Okay. 50th. It's 3 of those. The 60th, the 63rd, the 64th, the 65th. There's 3. 66, 67, 68. So everybody else is 3. So just to keep it easier, I'm going to just do the 12th. That's what they are. So that's 1, 2, 3, and the 15th. I think that's enough for now. So that's 3 victory points they've just spent. Yep, and they've still got 3, so yeah, that's 3. So they'll come on the board here in a second. But 3 victory points takes them down to 6. Okay, from a victory point of view, that's going to be tight. This is a whole game in itself, balancing these victory points and expenditures. So they are placed there. So that's the end of the reinforcement phase. We could mobilize Soviets. And if I read this right, the Soviets can participate right away. So we move on next to, yeah, the Soviets, so you pay 1 for each unit. That's what makes them expensive. So next is strategic movement. Player moves units on the strategic display to and from the display and on the game map via rail movement. So we're in the 10s here. Let's examine that. And this is part of the reason the North Koreans wanted to go first, or the communists, because they could get their units on faster. During the strategic move, units may conduct one of the following actions: to an area, adjacent area, move by land to or from the strategic map, which is what we're going to do, embark ports, move to or from the game map in the Korean area strategic by embarking or debarking on ports, amphibious. Now, the only real special movement the communists have, units that begin the strategic movement phase on a rail hex may use rail movement outside the current scope. While using rail movement, use unlimited distance. Units cannot combine rail and regular movement, so once they move, they can't move in the movement phase. Communist units may enter the game map from the strategic display, which is what those Chinese armies are, using rail movement. Enter on any rail that extends beyond. Likewise, communist units may exit the map. So if I interpret that correctly, I'm assuming these units can use rail movement, and then the units I just purchased, and that will be part of strategic movement. So for example, and there is no, I have not read, and I'll be corrected if this is wrong, anything about you can't move an enemy ZOC, and there's a limit to the number of units that may rail. If they begin the strategic movement phase on rail hex, they may move that way. So, like this, well, here's the problem. This hex apparently has no connect, well, it can come up here and then go down here. So they can all rail to anywhere. So for example, I could take this guy and rail him here. This guy and rail him here. This guy and rail him here. But what's interesting now is, or maybe I'll just use them as a backup line because got the strategic map, and now we can rail this guy and move him here. Solid wall of Chinese. You know, I'm not necessarily worried about invasions, but sorry about that. Should have closed my Outlook before doing this. Okay, that fixed that. So now I'm worried about these ports. That's why I'm doing this with this army here. And this army here. It doesn't mean it'll stop them, but it does at least temporarily hold them back. Then I've got this unit. And that's the max stacking. Actually, this unit I'll do. Well, I'll do 2 here. Can't exceed the stacking limit. And 1 here. And 1 here. So they're all marked moved, which is good too. That'll remind me I can't move them. Alright, so that's the rail movement. You know, I'm thinking I can actually move these guys now in also. I'll have to look at that here. I remember reading you could do that. We're at 13 minutes, so let me scope. There was an interesting remark. I'll look for that later. Let's see. Well, I can't. Let me look for it now. Okay, we did find it. Likewise, the PLA, this is an example of how scope works. Western forces cannot move into or attack forces in Red China at limited war. The scope is only South Korea and North Korea. Likewise, PLA and Soviet units set up on the map cannot leave China or the Soviet Union until limited war. So if I'm reading that right, that means these units can participate, which is interesting. Well, I'll take those rules at face value. I know I'll be corrected if I'm wrong. And let's put them here. Keep getting everything popping in the way. So that's rail movement too. So that's the end of rail movement. Now it's the movement phase. Well, in the movement phase, there is, well, it doesn't look like I can get rid of slack right now. So now the movement phase, these units are trapped, if I read this right. If I look at this, they can't cross this way. These are blocked, but if attacked, they'll be halved. So that's a delaying position. This unit, I'm actually going to, per guerrilla unit, I'm going to pull this unit and disband it, which means it's still 1950, and the US player loses a victory point. Now the question is, do I want to disband these units? No. So this is the one unit I will disband. I can keep disbanding if they're in South Korean, but now in 1951 there's no victory point loss. But that does well. These units can't come back to life either. I mean, if I this is a quick 2 victory points. And that makes up for the victory points that they're going to lose, inevitably with the attack. You know, what the heck? I'm going to disband this unit and this unit. And that now takes them back to 4 negative points here. And with that done, now it's the movement phase. Wow, this is interesting. I do have, these units can move. I can use these guys as slowing down cannon fodder. Well, now that's interesting. Or I could just pull them back and form a solid line. Actually, can they pretty much stop every... No, they'll be able to run through. Well, let's pull them back here. Okay. And then the replacement units will stay here and they can get reinforced. So, wow. That changes the complexion of things. Before, it looked like the UN was on the edge of victory. But now, participation by the Chinese, and if I read the rules right, the Soviets changes this greatly. And guerrillas will start appearing next turn here. So let's look at the sequence of play, and I think we can then bring this to a close. Strategic movement, no combat, and that's it. The 1950 ends with a large Chinese presence in Korea. And yeah, now it's North Korea's in the war. So pretty much everything changes. Does the UN have the horsepower? Wow. And the UN is definitely behind in victory points thanks to that guerrilla rule. I wish if I'd realized that sooner, I would have used the units in the pocket too and disbanded them perhaps sooner too. You're only allowed to disband a total of 6 the entire game, so at least I got 3, and that now gives us, that makes up for the 3 victory points communists spent to bring in, mobilize 3 Chinese armies. And then these units are in the game too. So we may quickly go to stalemate here with these kind of forces involved. We'll see. Alright, well, thanks for watching. Comments below, let me know if you like it, and please subscribe so you can be told when other ones come up. Thanks.